Do you ever wish that you could remember things more easily? Today, we're diving into something that can help expand your memory, mnemonic devices. If you've ever struggled to remember important information, whether that's numbers or faces or names, mnemonic devices can really help improve your ability to do these things. So let's break down how they work and how you can use them to unlock the full potential of your memory. So mnemonics are kind of like little brain hacks. So they take information that might be difficult to remember and translate it in a way that's easier for our brain to recall later. A really great example of a mnemonic is something like HOMES, which is a mnemonic device that a lot of us used, I know I did, back in grade school to help us remember the name of the Great Lakes. Whether it's through catchy phrases, vivid imagery, or familiar associations, mnemonics can help learning feel less like a chore and more like a game. So there are a couple of different types of mnemonic devices, and we'll go through each one because each one has a different way in which it can be best applied. So let's go through some examples and I'll talk about the best times to use each one. So up first is acronyms. Acronyms are probably the most common type of mnemonic device that's used. I'm sure you've all used them before. And a great example of this is the one we already talked about. It's HOMES. So in HOMES and in all other acronyms, you take the first letter of each word that you want to remember and help it form into another word. So in the HOMES example, H is for Huron, O is for Ontario, M is for Michigan, E is for Erie, and S is for Superior. So in that way, we can remember all the names of the Great Lakes. Up next, number 2 is acrostics. So acrostics are very similar to acronyms, they're just kind of supercharged. So instead of taking the first letter of each word and forming it into a word, you're gonna take each letter and form it into the first letter of a sentence. So the example here is remembering the planets. So here what we've got is my very educated mother just served us nachos. So it used to be my very educated mother just served us 9 pizzas, but of course Pluto's not a planet anymore, so we stop at the end and create nachos instead. So it stands for, Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. And at number 3, we have chunking, which is probably my personal favorite, and it is most appropriate for when we're trying to remember strings of numbers. So we see this very often throughout our daily life because it's used in things like credit cards and phone numbers. So anytime we have a long string of numbers that we want to remember, it's very difficult to do. So instead, what happens is we end up chunking it or forming it into individual sets of numbers. And then we can just remember those sets. So in the credit card example, you see the numbers grouped into groups of 4 usually. And in telephone numbers, we see the 3 digits for the area code, and then another 3, and then the 4 remaining. So at number 4, we have the memory of Loki, otherwise known as the memory palace. So this one has been around through ancient times, and it's one of the more complicated ones. But here what you're gonna do is kind of envision yourself as you walk through a familiar place, and you're going to be able to see things that you want to remember in those various locations. So imagine that you're trying to remember a grocery list. And so you visualize yourself walking through your kitchen, and maybe you see some apples on the table, some milk on the counter. And that would help you remember that you need to get apples and milk from the grocery store. At number 5, we have imagery and association. So imagery, just like in the method of Loki, is a great way to try to remember things. So in an imagery situation, what you're gonna try to do is associate a particular image with an item that you're trying to remember. And the more vivid and unusual the image, the more likely it is to stay with you. So as an example for this, think that you're trying to remember that the capital of Japan is Tokyo. And so in your mind, instead of just seeing the word Tokyo, you see a big toe with a key. Tokyo. And now I want to touch just briefly on what a lot of people come and ask me about, which is methods to help them improve remembering people's names and faces. And so a great way that mnemonics can help with this is by association. So here, when you meet someone, You try to associate their name with an object and then combine it with a physical trait of that person that makes it very easy for you to remember it every time you see them. So for example, let's say that you meet someone named Bob, and Bob has a nice round face. And so you can envision it as his face is a ball that bobs up and down. Bob, ball. The great thing about mnemonics is that they're highly personalized and you can easily create your own. Also keep in mind, if you really want something to stick out, make sure that it's highly unusual to you as well. And another tip to help things stand out is to use as many of your senses as possible. So try to use not just what something would look like, but what it might smell like, what it might sound like, and etc., etc. It's also important to remember that mnemonics are not without their limitations. So while they're great for remembering lists and numbers, they're not great for understanding deep concepts. Plus, as you can see, they can take a little bit of time and effort to create. But if you're willing to invest that time, they can be highly effective. In fact, one study found that when they took normal everyday people and taught them different types of mnemonic devices and mnemonic techniques, they performed just as well as memory athletes on tests of memory. So it's not necessarily that these memory athletes have some unusual memory capacity. It's just that they've been taught the best techniques to get the most out of their memory and unlock its full potential through these mnemonic techniques. Mnemonic devices really are like secret weapons for your memory. They make recalling numbers, facts, and names way easier and more fun. So next time you have something tricky that you're trying to remember, why not give one of these a try? You might just unlock your brain's full potential. So thank you so much for tuning in today for our talk on mnemonic devices and unlocking your memory's full potential. If you enjoyed it and you'd like to hear more things about unlocking your mind's full potential, don't forget to like and subscribe. Until next time, don't forget, your mind matters.